Check out Say, where do you stay safe? Thought finds out, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. One of our advocacy, woman's nervous system work differently. So, should you approach none other than Miss Rachel Korb? Welcome, Miss Rachel. I'm on Abstract Essay, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Daniel. So I'm Rachel Korb. I'm a somatic leadership coach specializing in supporting high achieving women, leaders, and startup professionals. And I have just over a decade in senior leadership roles at remote startups and also coaching. And so I really focus on the unique needs of women's nervous systems, how their female physiology is different, and really helping them thrive in all parts of their life.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Rachel. Thank you. Our cheering squad is cheering for you. And today, let's talk about bottom up leadership. Why regulating your body comes before managing your mind. How somatic practices create a foundation for clear thinking and executive presence. So tell us, let's start with the core premise bottom up leadership. In a business world obsessed with mindset hacks, why is it starting with the body is not just a complementary but a foundational for effective leadership?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And the thing is, right, you said, I like to say we live in a neck up society. Same thing for leadership, where logic, data leads. That's very important, but it's only part of the picture. And what we've learned through research over like recent research with neuroscience and our advances in technology is that 80% of our fibers in our vagus nerve move from body to mind. And what that means is we have bidirectional communication from the mind to the body, but the body to the mind. And we're seeing that 80% comes from the body and moves into the mind. That impacts how we respond in different situations. It can be how we communicate, how we react, our emotional regulation, how we make decisions, how well our memory functions. And so when we think about body first or starting with the bottom up, it's understanding what is the body actually communicating with us? How does it influence our mind so that we can better work with our body to really improve all aspects of our life and really how we show up as leaders?
Interesting and empowering answer, Miss Rachel. So, how do you define executive presence through the lens of a somatic awareness rather than just through a communication skills or confidence?
Yeah, so when we think about executive presence, I'm gonna go with like something super geeky, which is our mirror neurons. And so you and I both have them. We all have them as human beings. And so right now, on a subconscious level, they're communicating with each other. Mine are sending messages to yours, telling you if you're safe or not safe. Yours are then receiving that, and that messaging goes to your body. So even if I sound like super relaxed, but maybe I'm not, maybe I'm just like repressing something down, your mirror neurons hear that. And so when we think about that through the lens of executive presence, it really impacts the energy that you bring into a space, how people respond. And so when we think about somatics, that's more the movement piece, right? That's
Mm.
not as much of the executive presence, but somatics can be a tool to help us regulate our nervous system so that when we come in to an important meeting or a pitch or some kind of maybe more high pressure situation or just the day-to-day meeting with your team or having a company all hands, am I coming in with that presence that comes from a regulated state versus a dysregulated state, and what that communicates across the audience with whom you're communicating?
Miss Rachel, for skeptical leaders who says, I think with my brain. not my body. What is the most compelling piece of neuroscience or evidence you use to explain why this approach works?
Yeah, so 80% of our in our nervous system, we have 80% of the fibers are afferent, meaning they move from body to the mind. And so when they move to the body of the mind, it's communicating messages, for example, to the brain of muscles are tense, breathing is shallow, you are in danger. Your brain then does something called predictive processing, where it looks through the catalog of past experiences of like, okay, does this mean that I'm safe or I'm not? And then it sends it back down to the body. So I'd say that's the most compelling piece of research that we have now is we really see that 80% of the information is going from body to mind.
The body to mind. So let's talk about the science and the why. Can you walk us through a simple example of how can unregulated psychological state directly hijack the prefrontal cortex and impairs decision making?
Yeah, so when we think about this, this is less psychological, more physiological. So this is how the nervous system is responding more on a subconscious level. And so when we're dysregulated, what's happening is we're either moving into fight or flight state or freeze or shutdown state, depending on kind of what your default mode is. And so many leaders that I work with are in fight or flight state. That's their default mode. And what happens here is we move into signals of like anxiety, irritability, binary thinking, just like a surge of thoughts. I like to call them thought tornadoes. And when this happens, the brain kind of has like three evolutionary levels. And so the prefrontal cortex, normally it's attached, but as soon as we start to dysregulate, it kind of, there's like this slip. So Dr. Dan Siegel has really good explanation about this. I highly recommend it. And he walks through like the hand model for the brain. But essentially, as soon as the prefrontal cortex, our most evolved part of the brain, detaches, we might move into the older systems of their brain. And if we move into the amygdala, that's our fear center. And so then we're coming from a place of fear. We're coming from a place of reactivity, a place of survival. And so when we think about that in the context of leadership, if we're not regulated, we're not using the most evolved aspect of our brain. We're actually moving into older aspects of the brain that are survival based.
Miss Rachel, you talk about the body before the mind. How do somatic practices help rewire the nervous system's default setting from threat reactive to a challenge responsive?
Yeah. So when we look at this, the main switch, if you will, is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve has the ability to move us into a parasympathetic or a sympathetic state. Sympathetic is where we're in a dysregulated state, the fight or flight or freeze or shutdown. Parasympathetic is when we're in social engagement or connection. It's also called within the window of tolerance. So when it comes to somatics are able to activate the vagus nerve. And when we activate the vagus nerve in the right way, that's what activates our parasympathetic nervous system, being able to bring us back into this state of connection, into this state of social engagement. And over time, the more that we practice it, we build something called vagal tone. So just like, right, if you want to build muscle, you don't work out once and you're like, oh, I'm going to be super fit, right? You go consistently to the gym. The
Hmm.
vagus nerve is the same way. So you can build your vagal tone over time with consistent practices. There are different types of practices that you can use. So somatics, movement, being in the body, as well as breath work. Breath work has some of the best resources or techniques that you can use to increase your vagal tone and access a more regulated state more quickly and return to that over time and build out your window of tolerance so you can stay regulated more consistently.
The personal practice and experience, Miss Rachel. Why is one simple, accessible somatic practice you recommend every leader start their day with to set their psychological baseline?
Yeah. So it depends where they are in their journey, but I'm going to go with like, if you've never done it before, what should you do? So the first is starting with a morning practice. It takes less than 5 minutes. So when you wake up in the morning, stacking it to something you do every day, right? So an example would be sitting up in bed or standing up out of bed. And the first thing is just connecting in, getting curious. What am I noticing in the body? What sensations are there? Building that awareness. Then moving into what are those physical sensations? What is the language that I use to describe them? And then we move into connecting it to emotions. So, what emotions are present in relationship to the different physical sensations? And then the last piece is what do I need today? Right? A lot of the time we don't think about what we need. And when I say needs, it's where am I in terms of energy? Am I going to need to build in more breaks? Maybe I haven't had enough water. Um, Maybe I'm going to need to like connect into different practices. I work mainly with female clients, and so we look also at the menstrual cycle. So based on where I am in my menstrual cycle, what are those needs that I actually have? And so it's really about building awareness as a baseline first. So before we go into how do I up and down regulate, we need to make sure that I'm able to develop what's called body literacy, part of interoception, which is a skill set that you need to help build out and be able to practice actual regulation techniques.
Miss Rachel, can you share a story of a coaching client or a moment in your own career where a shift in a bodily state led to a dramatic shift in a leadership outcome?
Yeah. So one client that I'm thinking of, oh, there's a few actually that are popping up now, but I'll go with the first one. So she was in a leadership role, of course, leading the science team and really hands on with so many initiatives across the company. And when she came to me, she was quite overwhelmed, felt exhausted, just doing too much. And so the beauty working with her is she had already done a lot or physically in terms of sports, but also around mindfulness. And so she could connect into her body. So that gave her a really strong baseline of understanding what's actually going on in the body. The problem was she wasn't listening to it, and that's what happens a lot is we override these signals until we can no longer override them, right? Non-overriding means we've already hit burnout, or we have migraines, or we have insomnia, or we have high functioning anxiety. And so in her case, what we did is we slowed down to connect back into the body, to spend some time grounding at the beginning of each session, and then exploring, okay, what is really happening below the surface. And what we realized is a big driver for her was providing value, showing self worth, like a lot of proving and just doing rather than actually aligning with what she needed. And so we spent time with embodied self compassion, which is one of the columns I focus on in terms of somatic practices of how do we bring in the somatic piece, how do we connect into the body, but also how do we develop an antidote for the inner critic, for that self judgment, which every human has, right? And so after that, that led her to really going after what she wanted. So still leading at the company, but doing it in a way which is much more balanced, where she has boundaries. She left the city that she was living in for a beachside town she really wanted to live in. She started a long-term relationship and is very fulfilled in that, and also she started a side project, which is a dream project that she had had for a long time but didn't act on it. So it really kind of transformed all parts of her life from her active career to her personal life and like passion projects that she wanted to go after.
Interesting, Miss Rachel. And leaders often face high stakes, unpredictable moments. What is a 30-second body hack they can use in the middle of a tense meeting or before a critical presentation?
Yeah, so the physiological side, that is the, right now we have the strongest evidence that's the most effective practice. And so it's something you can look up. I'll explain how it works. It's 30 seconds or less. And what it does is it activates our vagal brake, i.e., it resets the nervous system, brings you back into a regulated state. So you inhale once through the nose, fully filling the lungs. You inhale a second time to try to expand them a little bit more. And then you exhale out of the mouth. And you can sigh if you're in a meeting. I tell my clients you don't have to sigh. If you're on like a Zoom call or something, you can mute and you can actually make noise, because when we make a noise, it could be like a hum or a roo, that
Mhm.
stimulates the vagus nerve through the vocal cords, and so that can help with the practice. And so you repeat that a few times, 3 to 5 times, and that can really help bring your body back down in the moment. If they can't see you, so for example, say right now, like you and I are in a meeting, you can't see my arms and legs, like I could maybe shake out a little bit so I can remove any excess energy before I go into that physiological sigh.
Miss Rachel, how does somatic awareness change how leaders handle conflict or delivers a difficult feedback? Does it change the content or just the delivery?
So it changes how you respond, right? Because if we're
Mm,
only using the mind, it's just what are those reactive responses? But if I'm in the body and the mind, say you and I are having maybe I have you're a direct report of mine, and I need to deliver some constructive feedback. It's a difficult conversation. Maybe it's an emotionally charged. So I come in and I have like my framework for how do I deliver constructive feedback to my team member who's having, I don't know, performance issues. They may not respond well, right? And
mm,
if I'm only coming from the brain or the mind, like I'm going to be responding from that place. Whereas if I'm connected into my body and I have that soma awareness, I might notice, ooh, as soon as they maybe they start getting defensive right away, right? I'll be like, oh, I'm noticing there's a contraction. My shoulders are tightening. They're maybe moving up. There's a knot in my chest. I'm feeling like this kind of like, right? I'm starting to notice, ooh, I'm moving into fight or flight state. What that does is that gives you a moment of, okay, I'm moving into fight or flight state. I cannot respond effectively right now. So you can take a breath, can calm down, and you can even note it, right, to your team member and say, oh, I'm noticing in myself like this is bringing up something for me too. And the reason why this is important is because we're establishing psychological safety when we have a certain level of transparency. And so from there, once we've taken that breath, we can then say, okay, and we can even say like, give me a minute just to think about this, because this is like really kind of hitting me. You can regulate the self. Once you bring that back down, right, using the physiological sigh, takes 30 seconds or less, then you can respond effectively, right? So this improves communication, this improves the decisions you make, this improves the relationship that you have with that individual, because you're actually nurturing the relationship versus just reacting to what's being said. So I'd say it's not just it's not just delivery, it's the content, it's everything. Because if I'm noticing this in myself, I can pause and I can make a choice versus just coming from a state of reactivity. And I can emotionally regulate myself much better.
Miss Rachel, how do practices like breath work, posture alignment, or even a mindful movement different in the impact? Is there one gateway practice you find most universally effective?
I mean, breath work has some of the strongest evidence, as does movement, but it's really unique to each individual. And so when I work with my clients, that's what we spend time exploring. I have some clients who are really drawn to some practices, like love breath work. I have others who hate it. And they're like, it
Mm.
just doesn't work. It's super well for me. Maybe they have one or two, but they're not a huge fan. And they find movement can be much more effective for them. And so I would say there's no one gateway, and that's the most important thing is like nervous system mastery is simple, but it's also unique to you. There's no one size fits all, and especially when we're looking at female physiology, it changes throughout the month. So what works for me in my follicular phase isn't going to work for me in my luteal phase, most likely. And so I need to adapt that and really listen to the body. And also, something else I've seen with my clients is it really depends on the situation, right? Different situations trigger the nervous system in different ways or activate the nervous system in different ways. And so we need to think about like when this happens, what is the best resource for me? And it will change over time. Like I've had phases where certain practices were the best for me, and then at a certain point I'm like, oh, they're not working as well, and then I explore and play with other ones, and I find like, oh, this is the one that's working for this stage of my life right now.
Interesting, Miss Rachel. As a coach, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Short term and long term goals, good question. As a coach, my short term goal, I mean, I really think the short term is just like raising awareness around this because it's a
Mm-hmm.
really important topic, and specifically for female physiology, because the majority of research is around male physiology and the majority of teachings are around male physiology, and it's just not the same. We need to have a tailored approach of what works for male physiology versus female physiology. And then for me, long term, it's how do we how do I empower people to design a life they love from the inside out? And what I mean by that is a lot of clients that come to me have been very successful, but it's not sustainable. They're burnt out, have high functioning anxiety, or maybe they're not burnt out but exhausted. And there's just kind of this question is like, is it really worth it? Like I've achieved everything I want, but I'm not where I want to be. And so my long term is how can we really find that within the self? And so you can have that success, whatever, however you want to define success and what that looks like for you, but it's a sustainable success. It's a success that allows you to have fulfillment, calm, energy, and to really show up in the way that you'd like to show up in the world.
Miss Rachel, before we wrap up our discussion for today, and good luck to your goals and looking forward for more success. And please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in its second season, and my food 101 is sixth season already. Geography 101, Love Letters, Movie 101, Review Music 101, our fourth season, Science 101, Sex 101, and its second season, Amma Baby Podcast, Mental Health 101, Law 101, Bible Verses 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and Motivation 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Rachel, tell us if you could leave our audience with one radical thought about redefining leadership success, starting from the body up, what would it be?
Hmm. I think it would be one piece is asking yourself, how can I slow down and listen more? It's not
Yes.
advice, it's more an inquiry to start asking yourself and just pause after you ask and notice how's the body responding.
Mhm. Yes, and thank you for that responding, Miss Rachel. Thank you. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah. So if anyone wants to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn under Rachel Korb. You can check out my website, rachelkorb.com, where that shows a little bit more about what I do in terms of one-on-one coaching as well as nervous system mastery for women, a program that I offer a couple times a year. And then if you're just looking for more resources, I'm on Substack under Coaching with Rachel. And that's where I share a lot more around nervous system mastery for female entrepreneurs.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Rachel Korb because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering coaching will rise. So, Miss Rachel, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
Monica, people, see you